Yeah, my name is André Lahmann. I'm working at the Leipzig University Library, and we are building VuFind instances. Well, just give me a second. Here we go. All right, now I got my notes on the screen. Okay, so. Yes, I started working at the Leipzig University Library in 2012. That was a few months after the finc project started, which I will introduce in a second. And since October last year, I'm the developer at the Leipzig University for VuFind 2, doing the migration from VuFind 1 to VuFind 2. And my talk will focus mainly on our current development workflow. We are a team of developers, and we figured after working with VuFind 1 that there were some improvements we could do for our workflow, and so we built some tools and that stuff to make the everyday development a little bit more easier. And at this point, I have to thank especially one colleague of mine, Lahmann. Big credits to him because he did all the Git and Dakka magic I am showing here. So I've also done something, but that's all his. So all right. So some background first. The finc project started in 2011, in June 2011, and its goal was to develop discovery search systems for 11 libraries in Saxony. It succeeded with quite big success because in the end of 2014 we founded the finc user community that allows libraries or any institution pretty much to become member of the finc user community and to get a catalog or get the catalog realized by us using our index. We also built an article index this year, a free article index, and with I think roughly about like 60 or 70 million records now, at the moment. And yeah, we are a community with a growing membership. At the moment, there are 17 institutions member of the finc community, and right now we are in the process of bringing our finc VuFind 1 system, I would like to say, because it's a highly customized system, to VuFind 2, and yeah, that's the point where everything started, right? Because our workflow that started at the beginning, more or less from the finc project, was that every developer was developing on his individual system, then committing all the code to a subversion repository. And from that on, we could do manual deploys to testing systems in order to figure out if the features we tested already on our local systems also would work on the servers we are planning to deploy this code for. We had to have command line access on the alphas, and it was a little bit. It worked pretty well. I mean, the project was a success, and it was, the structure is also something that evolved somehow, so it was learning by doing, and but it wasn't very comfortable, at least when you have the possibility to change things, and what's a better possibility than to shift to another major release. We are thinking about just to do this. So on top of this workflow, we had a quite simple VuFind structure. So VuFind 1 did support different config folders if you map them like straight away from the Apache server, right? But so we are having like for each of the institutions, and there were at least there were 11. We are having config and theme folders for all these institutions in one folder. So it was in the end quite a it was hard to manage, and as one library after the other was brought online, and we were still developing features while also bringing new libraries online. It was growing and growing and growing, and we are also coming to this point that we couldn't actually bring any or to push any of our coding back to the community, because we had like a highly customized VuFind 1, and that kind of separated us from the community, which was very bad, and made the makes the transition from VuFind 1 to 2 quite difficult. But anyway, that allowed us to realize lots of catalogues being online in only 2 years. So that's probably the price you have to pay. All right, so those general difficulties were taken into the consideration when we decided to migrate to VuFind 2. And the first steps were done in October last year. So we have tons of codes that needed and still needs to be ported. And our main goal is actually that we want to realign with the community and to contribute what we think are good features and what you decide if you want it, right? And for this realigning with the community and for those contributions to get back into the community code repository, we had to switch from Subversion to Git, which is not a bad switch, but we had to do it. And so the infrastructure changed a little bit, and we were thinking about, okay, what should we keep and what should we change? Definitely the workflow, because it was, although it was manual and well, partly manual, and no, yeah, it turned out to be very reliable. We have 3 different stages. We test our code on alpha stages, then it goes to staging, and then we deploy on live if everything's fine. So this structure is, still remains the same, but what we actually did not want to take over with was the very simple structure we had set up in VuFind 1 with all the config folders in one folder and config files that were crammed with all its stuff and so on, so which were quite hard to maintain. So starting with the workflow, which we wanted to keep but make it a little bit easier, like removing the manual stuff, the manual work we had to do. We decided to go with Dakka. Dakka is a software that is used to isolate applications in a dedicated environment. It's kind of a you could say like a virtual machine for applications. Of course, you can use those for distributed machines, but in our case, we are just using it for development purposes. But one could think about maybe also deploying VuFind in a Docker container and for maybe even for load balancing or whatever, right? So, but Docker only works under Linux. You have to have, I think, kernel at least 3.2, and but we are mostly all using Linux systems in our team, so therefore this was quite a good choice for us. And yeah, we provide a Docker image for VuFind developers that is based on a Debian LAMP stack, and that already provides an Xdebugger interface. It includes PHP unit, PHP CS, and also for our Foundation 5 theme, a grunt, which is a SAS listener, which which compiles the style sheets for us. And it's online on github.com. And if you want to, you're welcome to check it out. And how this works is actually like this. So we do it this way. We have Docker running on our local systems. So we have all like the standardized environment for developing. So we don't have to fiddle around with, do you have installed the right PHP version, or do you have, like, because you have a different distro, you're using the wrong Apache or whatever. So you don't have to configure anything, especially very useful when you get a new colleague and he should start with VuFind. So you just give him the Docker image, he presses run, and he has set up a completely full stack of VuFind development tools and an environment. So I can run that on my local host. Right now, there's nothing here. It's dead. Can't find anything. And all you have to do, well, that looks pretty much, but it actually is not, is to run a Docker container. To run a Docker container that is based on these the VuFind 2 image that is provided by Ulf Lahmann, but which is on also online in a Docker hub. So after I execute this command, and wait a second, because the Docker container must build up, I should come up with, yeah, there we go. So we have VuFind running. Admittedly, there's a little bit of config behind, right, in the background. So we you can't just take stock VuFind, point the Docker image to the folder where the VuFind source code is located, and start the Docker image. But it pretty much works this way. So if you're a little bit familiar with setting up the config files, it is really done in 10 minutes. And if you want to try it, maybe tomorrow in the Hackfest or whenever, give me a sign. I can give you a hand maybe with that. So yeah, the system not here is running, and I can do actually searches on it, like an empty search. Ah, no, I can't, because I just created a new Docker image. I have to set up the database, right? So I will do that, because every time you delete a container, of course, it deletes the database. But you can do that without a configure. Do fix. Enter whatever you want. Oops. Now it's working. All right, so here we go. This is, so you got we got VuFind running for our development purposes. The next step was to make the workflow even easier to use Git hooks, so that we don't have to, well, you can now develop on your local system and program all the code you want, but in order to show the features you have implemented to your colleagues, for instance, our non-developers, which are usually librarians who want to check out the features and want to test those and so on, they don't have a Docker system on their computer running, right? So therefore, we are using the alpha systems, and we needed an automated way and an easy way to provide for them alphas. That's like presenting systems, right? And so we are using Git hooks for those. That means we are tagging the the Git commits, and by a certain syntax or a certain schema of the tags, a Git hook sees this tag, and then deploys an alpha on a system. That means that those alphas, those demo cases, are disposables. We can just create an alpha and you can look at it and say, yeah, that's fine, or you can criticize us and we can keep on coding, but we are not depending on someone having running like a develop or a LAMP stack available at their host's local host to run VuFind, but they can just show a look at it in their browser. So we are doing the same for the staging systems, although we have Jenkins in between, so in order to provide or to make sure that codes are passing the tests. And the live deploying is still being done manually and also by a person that is a non-developer, just to do a little bit extra more bureaucracy in order to get it a little bit to hinder ourselves from too fast updates of live systems, right? So just a short explanation, maybe Git hooks are just shell scripts that are triggered on certain Git events, and they are being executed, and and you can do whatever you want then with them. All right, so we have this thingy here. But I can show you our, where's my mouse? Here's my mouse. So this is the overview for, those are all our Git alpha instances. But I want to put this one now online in order to look at it, right? So I've got my branch here. I will explain this a little bit later, how the branches are organized. So I just tag this one now. All right. So I've tagged it now, and I am pushing this tag now to our Git repo. Now the deploying of the alpha begins. It takes a little bit. And as I created this alpha earlier this morning, there's already a database image, so that's why it's saying restoring table structure from backup and so on. So all right, and this is just the output from the grunt, from grunt, so that it's compiling the style sheets. All right, so now we can have a look at here. If we find the demo, it is over here with my falsely spelled tag comment. I can start it. Yeah, that always shows up, but only the first time for the cache folder. And here we go. So we have those disposable alphas that we can use just for showing what we are doing for, to our other colleagues. And that's pretty much the infrastructure part, right? And the workflow design. What was the biggest problem was the how to structure the files in VuFind, and for all the houses we have, right? We have more than 11 institutions that are potentially becoming VuFind 2 instances, and therefore we want to avoid having config folders full of crammed full with folders that you don't need for this particular instance. So we came up with the idea to use VuFind 2 multi-site capabilities that we, everybody, or probably most of you know that you can use VuFind for multiple instances, and each of those instances gets its own config folder. And those config folders are just pointed then by the Apache is pointed to the specific config folder. And we decided to choose a simple naming schema that is VuFind 2 and then the easel of the particular library. So that we have three different, or at least two different folders. The language folder is a part of the easel config folder over here. So we have those two folders, the theme with the template files for the institution and the config folder over here with the easel. And optional, it would be possible to have even specific modules for those institutions, but at the moment we don't have them, but it's always good to know that it's possible. And in those config folders, we are then using the inheritance functionality from the Zen framework in order to build nested config files. So we made it we built that with 3 layers. We have a global configuration for all our VuFind instances. We have instance-specific configurations, and we have for those instances context-specific configurations. That means every VuFind instance that's running on our systems is inheriting from local config, the settings, right? Anything that is for this instance a little bit more specific, like the name of the catalog or a different theme or whatever, comes into the instance-specific folder over here, the easel, into config, and then every developer can build, can define its own configuration for those instances as well. That goes into the dev folder. If you deploy such an VuFind instance, for instance, to alpha, the Git hook is then reading the configuration from the alpha folder, actually, and so we are able to provide or to define the configs only in the minimal differential way that is just like what we want to prevent is that that we have any settings doubled, and in order to do so, we are only writing in those configs here what is only specific to the alpha instance or to the dev environment and so on. On top of that, we also added another theme, a finc theme, that provides an abstraction layer that is actually used for functionalities that are not being pushed into the community VuFind version, because if we have like templates that are a little bit different from the templates that vanilla VuFind has, we also we keep those in the finc theme, but we keep this finc theme with style information for Foundation 5 and Bootstrap in order to allow our instances, our institutions to choose freely what kind of framework they want to use. So that's the abstraction layer we had to use. All right, so both combined needed to be unfortunately you can't read, but the workflow plus the structure is then hopefully a structured workflow, and that needed to be done in our Git structure. So we are using Redmine, and which is a project management tool, and each issue gets a ticket like in Jira, and we are creating branches for each of those tickets, working on those branches, and we have sticky branches, or not sticky branches, but more persistent branches. Those are the instance branches, and then in those instance branches are only the configs for those specific instances again, right? So the developer can then, as I said already, use the subfolder for each configuration, and the deploy stages just grab whatever you define in the specific configuration folder. Yes, I can show you that actually here again. So what we have here is now my local my local VuFind is using this theme, which is our foundation theme, and the demo VuFind is actually using the same theme. All I have to do is to change the alpha config in order to use the bootstrap theme. It's done. I have to commit that, obviously. And now I just have to tag it again. All right, done. As we can see, we're having Bootstrap here, and on my local system still Foundation. So that's just to show that the different configs are actually really working. All right. I'm just mentioning those issue tickets, as you probably saw that when we are building pull requests, that they are usually named pull request underscore and some weird number. So this weird number is our ticket number. And this works actually pretty well for us at the moment. And the lessons we learned from this workflow was that the automated deploy and Docker environment does save a lot of time. We don't have to care about our local systems anymore. It's way easier to show features to somebody. And also the config structure, although it's at the beginning a little bit hard to get into it, how the dependencies works and all that stuff, and how the inheritance works, it does its job quite well in the end, because the complexity it adds because of the inheritance, it reduces and even more the complexity if you would have like complete config files for each instance and not inheritance from the global context. The only pitfall is that you cannot do it the same with the search specs YAML and with the open URL rules JSON we just introduced a few months ago. So that only works for the ini files because they got this parent config functionality from Zen framework. So we are still a little bit thinking about how to do that a little bit nicer. And also the workflow separates the coding task better, but as we are having specific issue branches and those are isolated and we can develop in those ones. But using Git and having a very structured Git repository demands from the coder to be very well organized in order to not code in the wrong branch or thinking about the features he wants to implement because some functionality that he needs for the one feature isn't available in the other branch. And so it is, one gets into it, but it's not that easy. Okay, and the hardest part actually at the moment is that we still are struggling a little bit to find an appropriate workflow to integrate the work that is being done on the pull requests we are issuing, because once we have created those pull requests, we don't have our issue branches anymore because we are doing the pull request against the VuFind org master, right? And we have our local master. And so it's quite difficult to merge those two. I mean, it is handleable, but it's not as comfortable as it should be. So yeah, this is pretty much our setup, which I wanted to show you. And this ends my talk. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions. Yes, please.
On the human side of things, how do you organize yourselves? Do you use like Kanban or Scrum or some other?
Excuse me, I didn't understand the first part of the question. On.
So now that you have explained the sort of the back-end side of things,
yes.
the technical side of things, how do you organize do you have like daily meetings or how do you organize your?
Well, we've got quite a big office room, so we are all sitting at the same place, and but we're using the Redmine project management tool very extensively. So everything is being done through tickets. Yeah.
Do you use a specific methodology, like Scrum or Kanban?
No, not actually. No.
You have your own.
Yeah. I mean, we do have weekly meetings, and but we don't have no. There's no specific methodology we are using, like Scrum or yeah.
Do you do like regular releases of your?
Well, at the moment we are still busy with porting the old code into the new VuFind, right? And because we are doing so and the old VuFind instances are all still running, we are not, we don't need to substitute them immediately, right? But our own VuFind catalog, as you saw here, this one here from the University Library in Leipzig, is pretty much the next one that should go online and hopefully fully featured. And so we are working on that, but unless we are not having until now we don't have like a fixed release schedule, right? So we do decide upon which features are implemented. We already have some VuFind 2 catalogs online, but those are new members. They didn't have VuFind 1 instances. So there are some features missing for them, but we're communicating with them when we have implemented new features, if they want to have those new instance or this new version online after they tested it and so on. So we do it a little bit more how the development goes, right? Because especially if you want to push our changes back into the community core, sometimes it takes time because we're improving it, and I mean it actually. So it would be quite hard to have like a fixed schedule, and yeah, reality doesn't fit in it, I think. All right.
So when you're deploying an alpha,
Yeah.
do you have one alpha server that you have to coordinate the use of, or are you actually spinning up separate instances for each time you tag an alpha?
We are, well, it's one server, but on the server there are these instances are being created.
Okay.
Yeah, one after the other, yeah.
So you have an unlimited capacity.
Yes, pretty much, yeah. Yeah. The only thing that might happen is if you have like 50 plus alphas, then it gets a little bit cramped, but apart from that, yeah. And you can delete it by just deleting the tag on, so I can delete the alpha now by yeah. So that's pretty much it, right? Demo deleted. Yeah.
I should also say the configuration inheritance with the parent ini is actually a not-Zen framework, but is part of VuFind. So
Oh, sorry.
well, no, that's fine, but we could in theory implement that for the other file types.
Yeah.
If that proved to be valuable.
You mean for the search specs YAML and so on?
Right. I mean, it's more difficult to do, I think, but if you could define the logic for how they merge together upon inheritance, it could be done.
Yeah. I mean, I like it very much actually, because it reduces maintenance for lots of instances pretty much, but yeah, I should think about that. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.